Hello and welcome to the Unseen Question. This video isn't here to tell anyone what to believe, but some questions just don't sit still. They rattle around in the back of your mind. They don't shout, they whisper. And once they're in, they tend to stay. Today, we're looking at four weird questions. Questions that, once you really think about them, might shift something. Not by brute force, but by simply pointing at the cracks. Let's begin with the first one. If God already knows the future, why did he create anyone who would go to hell? This isn't just a question about fire and brimstone. It's about intent. If you believe in a God who is all-knowing, then he would have full awareness before creating anyone of exactly how their lives would play out. Down to their last breath. Every thought, every mistake, every act of kindness, and every stumble. So if someone ends up in eternal torment, that wasn't just a tragic possibility. It was a certainty from the moment of their creation. It's not like a parent hoping their child turns out well. This would be more like designing a child specifically to fail, and then punishing them for it. People try to escape this problem by saying, well, we have free will. But what does free will even mean in this setup? If your creator knew, with absolute certainty, what choices you'd make, then those choices were never really in your hands. They were foreseen, locked in, permanent before you were even born. It's like programming a robot to fall off a cliff, watching it do exactly what you coded it to do, and then blaming the robot. When people ask why this question matters, the answer is pretty simple. Because it takes away the illusion of moral justice behind divine punishment. It shifts the story from one of fairness to one of pre-written tragedy. And if eternal torment is real, that makes it far worse. Infinite punishment for finite mistakes, carried out on beings designed to fail. What does that say about the designer? Now here's a second question that gets less attention but is just as unsettling. Why does God need belief more than behavior? Across so many traditions, the thing that matters most isn't kindness, compassion, or even moral integrity. It's belief. You can live a quiet, generous life, help others, stay honest, raise your kids with empathy. But if you don't believe in the right God or the right version of the story, you're out. Meanwhile, someone who lives a far more questionable life but repents and believes at the last moment is welcomed in. This isn't about personal feelings. It's about the architecture of these belief systems. They prioritize loyalty to a doctrine over how you treat others. Belief becomes the ticket. Behavior is secondary. Why is that? Why would an all-knowing, morally perfect being value allegiance over action? What kind of system punishes non-belief more harshly than cruelty? Think about how we treat people in the real world. We might not like someone's opinions, but we judge them by what they do. If someone harms others, we hold them accountable. If someone lives with kindness and empathy, we respect them, even if we disagree. Now compare that to the idea that the ultimate judge, the most perfect being possible, throws all that out in favor of doctrinal agreement. You're either in or you're out. Not because of your character, but because of what you think. Or don't think. It's a strange kind of tribalism. Only instead of colors or flags, it's metaphysics. Some people say this just reflects God's will, and that humans aren't supposed to understand it. But if we can't understand it, how can we be held responsible for failing it? If the system is too mysterious to make sense of, how can we be judged by it? Here's the third question, and this one's more about design than doctrine. Why are human beings so badly built? We are the product, we're told, of a perfect creator. But our bodies and minds are full of flaws, not small quirks. Major design problems. Let's start with the body. Our spines are terrible. Standing upright has wrecked our backs, twisted our knees, and left many of us in chronic pain by middle age. Our sinuses are poorly routed. Our eyes have blind spots. We choke easily because the windpipe and food pipe are dangerously close. Our reproductive systems are comically inefficient. Some people are born with organs outside their bodies, or without key parts of their brains fully formed. If you look at us like a machine, we're a prototype that somehow got released into production. But even more than that, think about the mind. Our brains are glitchy. We're prone to illusions, biases, anxiety spirals, and self-deception. Mental illness affects hundreds of millions. Depression, schizophrenia, OCD, PTSD. These are not moral failures. They're consequences of how the brain is wired. If we were fearfully and wonderfully made, it raises the question, why so many bugs in the system? Some people argue this is because of sin that we fell and became corrupted. But what kind of perfect system breaks this easily? What kind of supreme engineer builds something so fragile that one wrong move sends it into permanent dysfunction? In every other part of our lives, we know what bad design looks like. If your phone constantly overheats, crashes, and wipes your photos, you don't say, "This was made by a genius." You ask for a better one. Now, on to the fourth and maybe strangest question. One that tends to slip past people until they really stop and think about it. Why do the answers stop where the religion begins? Here's what I mean. In every other part of life, science, history, engineering, medicine, we keep asking. We test. We revise. We're okay with not knowing. We treat mysteries as starting points, not destinations. But in religion, the mystery is the answer. Why is there something instead of nothing? God. Why do we have consciousness? God. What started the universe? God. It's not that these are bad questions, they're great ones. But the moment God is inserted, the questions are treated as settled. Case closed. Curiosity ends not in deeper discovery, but an all-encompassing placeholder. And what's more, the placeholder doesn't actually explain anything. It just moves the mystery one step back. You ask what caused the universe, and get God. But then what caused God? The answer becomes, He just always was. But then, why not say the universe always was? Why invent a bigger unknown to explain the original one? It's like running into a locked door, and instead of trying to open it, just painting God on the front and walking away. Real explanations have structure. They let you make predictions. They can be tested, questioned, improved. God did it can't be falsified. It doesn't help us build telescopes, cure disease, or understand the stars. It's a full stop, dressed up as a revelation. This matters because curiosity is one of the most powerful forces we have. It's what makes children ask questions and adults build empires. Any idea that shuts that down, especially when it claims to be the final word, should raise suspicion. And here's the thing. These 4 questions aren't just academic. They shape how people live, how they treat others, how they see the world. They influence policies, education, human rights, medicine, war. They're not philosophical puzzles. They're real. Because if a belief system tells you people are born broken, or destined for hell, or defined by what they believe rather than how they behave, that shapes the world. It decides who's worthy of dignity, who's protected, who gets help, and who's left behind. This isn't about tearing things down. It's about holding ideas up to the light, seeing if they hold together, if they reflect the world we actually live in, or the one we were told to imagine. Let's keep going because this conversation isn't finished. The 4 questions we've already covered, they're like loose threads. And once you start pulling on them, more questions unravel. Here's one more that builds on everything we've talked about, and it's deceptively simple. Why does religion look so much like culture? Think about it. Where you're born almost always decides what God you believe in. If you were born in Pakistan, odds are you're Muslim. In Utah, probably Mormon. In rural India, Hindu. In Tel Aviv, Jewish. In Texas, evangelical Christian. Same human species. Totally different truths. Now ask yourself, if one of these religions was objectively true, like gravity or math, shouldn't it show up everywhere in the same way? Gravity works in Tokyo the same way it works in Toronto. Math isn't Catholic in Brazil and Buddhist in Korea. But gods seem very local. People often say, well, everyone's worshiping the same God in different ways. But that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. These religions don't just disagree on rituals. They disagree on core facts. Who the prophet was, what the afterlife is, what's allowed, what's a sin, what's sacred, what's blasphemy, what the rules are, and who gets punished. If religion were a human instinct, not a revelation, this is exactly what we'd expect. Different groups, over time, building different stories to explain their world. Stories shaped by geography, climate, politics, and language. Anthropologists have been studying this for years. When you zoom out and look at all the world's religions, patterns emerge. Gods tend to reflect their societies. Warrior cultures worship war gods. Agricultural societies worship fertility and harvest gods. Nomadic tribes tend to focus more on spirits and ancestors than strict dogma. In other words, gods look suspiciously like the people who invented them, and it gets more specific. Even within one religion, Christianity for instance, Jesus looks different depending on where he's being portrayed. European art shows him as pale and light-haired. Ethiopian Christians show him as black. In Latin America, he's often surrounded by local plants, colors, and iconography. The divine adapts to the familiar. This isn't a knock on creativity. It's a clue. If the truth were fixed and universal, we wouldn't see this level of customization. But we do. Constantly. Now let's pair that with another strange question. Why is the burden always on the doubter? In most areas of life, if someone makes an extraordinary claim, they're expected to back it up. If I told you I could levitate, you want to see it. If someone said they have a dragon in their garage, you'd probably ask for proof. That's normal. But when it comes to religion, the rules flip. Suddenly, the person who doesn't believe is the one being asked to justify themselves. Why don't you believe? What happened to your faith? Are you angry at God? The assumption is that belief is the default, and disbelief is a problem to be solved. But why? Why does the burden shift here? If a system makes huge claims about the origins of the universe, the nature of morality, the fate of your soul, shouldn't it come with some evidence? Shouldn't the bar be higher, not lower? Especially when those claims can have life-altering consequences. Some people say the evidence is all around us, that nature, complexity, or beauty proves design. But complexity doesn't equal design. Snowflakes are complex. Hurricanes are complex. Cancer is complex. Complexity just means something follows rules, not that it has a conscious creator. Others point to personal experience. They feel something in prayer. They see signs. They have faith. And that's fine on a personal level. But feelings aren't the same as facts. People have religious experiences in every faith tradition, often contradictory ones. A Christian feels Jesus. A Hindu feels Krishna. A Muslim feels Allah. A Buddhist feels awakening. They can't all be pointing to the same objective truth. Or if they are, the message is extremely garbled. Now here's another question, one that starts in childhood and never quite goes away. Why does God need so much protection from offense? In most religions, questioning God, mocking rituals, or drawing certain images is treated as dangerous, even criminal. Why? If a God is real and all-powerful and just, why would he need humans to defend his honor? If I insult Einstein, it doesn't make gravity disappear. If I mock Darwin, evolution keeps happening. If someone blasphemes against Newton, apples still fall. Reality doesn't flinch when it's insulted. But with religion, offense is treated as threat. Jokes are seen as dangerous. Doubts are labeled sinful. Apostasy is punished. Why? One possibility is that belief systems that can't withstand mockery probably can't withstand scrutiny either. In fact, you'll notice that the more fragile a belief is, the more fiercely it demands respect. Not because it earns it, but because it needs it to survive. Think about North Korea. You can't question the leader. You can't joke about him. You can't even speak casually about his family. It's not because he's divine, it's because the whole structure rests on illusion. And illusions need silence to stay intact. When you apply that same lens to the divine, things start to look familiar. Now let's step back a bit. Here's a broader question, not just about religion, but about us. Why do we find comfort in certainty more than truth? It's a strange thing. Most people say they want the truth. But in practice, we want answers that feel good, that give us structure, meaning, hope. Religion offers that in clear, comforting terms. You are special. The universe has a plan. Justice will be done. Death is not the end. Who wouldn't want to believe that? But comfort doesn't equal truth. A story can be comforting and still be false. A system can be reassuring and still be man-made. We all know that, but it's hard to sit with. It's why some people cling harder when doubts appear. Not because the evidence is strong, but because the alternative, uncertainty, feels too cold, too random, too empty. But maybe it's not. Maybe meaning doesn't have to come from above. Maybe it comes from connection, from honesty, from the quiet awe of being alive in a vast, indifferent universe, and still choosing to care. That's not emptiness. That's freedom. That's all for now. There is a long debate. These questions don't end here. If you're interested, we can explore deeper angles, the psychology of belief, the evolution of religion, the ways moral systems can thrive without gods. Thanks for being here at the Unseen Question. And remember, sometimes the most powerful answers begin with a question.